This is what a low-tech border looks like. 5 miles north of Londonderry babbles a tiny stream, too small to name, too important to ignore. The left bank is in the UK, the right bank in the Republic. In less than a mile, the contents will empty into Lough Foyle and the Atlantic. But for now, this is politically charged water.
At the moment, of course, it's possible to wander across the Irish border without really even noticing. The Republic there, the UK there. You just cross a bridge like this, across an insignificant little stream, and you've done the job. Now, the government says it can use technology to make sure it's as easy as this in the future. In the endless jargon of Brexit, this option is known as maximum facilitation, or Max Fac.
And what it means in substantive terms is relying on existing trade facilitations, custom simplifications to make it easier for goods to cross borders. So we're looking at things like trusted trader schemes, things that lower your risk profile, that would otherwise make it more likely that a truck would be pulled aside for customs checks, electronic pre-notification. All these things are designed to reduce times for crossing borders rather than actually replacing the border itself.
You can still find old border posts rotting away. All that stops the cars now are other cars, certainly not border guards with uniforms and questions. The UK government has promised that any new high-tech Max Fac solution won't require any physical infrastructure at all. Is this even possible? Well, according to the expert appointed by the European Parliament to look at the matter, it is.
From a strictly customs perspective, my estimation, and I'm still saying that this is very possible within the international standards, you could use best practices that is used, elevate them to a level where it's closer to 100% of what is possible today, which is not the case in any border around the world, and use it with very little friction or no friction at all.
One of the core technologies that will form the backbone of any solution are cameras that can read number plates. I've come to MAV Systems in Kent, one of the UK's leading makers of automatic number plate recognition systems.
Okay, so this is one of our intelligent ANPR cameras, which has everything on board to be able to work night and day. Infrared illumination will light up the number plates.
Managing Director Steve Walker says
cameras
high-tech frictionless borders are very possible.
Picture. There's a whole combination of things that are available that are in use around the world. So on the American borders, on the Norway and Sweden border, number one has to be the ANPR up front, so that that actually captures every vehicle as it comes down the road towards the border. And then linked into that, you can have associated technologies such as weigh in motion, which will detect the vehicle's weight as it goes past the number plate recognition camera, and also some radar and laser technology which can measure the shape of the vehicle, so you can classify the vehicles and check that they actually match the expected profile of that vehicle.
Although the government today reiterated its commitment to having no new cameras on the border, previously the Brexit Secretary David Davis has said that there are already enough in enough locations to do the job. This is where the trucks travelling between Belfast and Dublin used to stop to clear customs. Actually, customs and excise is comparatively straightforward for technology to streamline. Far harder is enforcing regulations like food standards or animal health. Matt Persson was Europe advisor to David Cameron when he was Prime Minister.
The really tricky parts are around regulatory standards and making sure that something that enters into a territory complies. Where do you check for that? If you don't check on the border, if you don't have spot checks on the border, where do you do that? That's much more difficult to make virtual. And I think that issue, that whole debate around regulatory compliance and regulatory divergence potentially between the UK and the EU is what makes the whole issue around the Irish border so difficult.
Far simpler to have the border for regulations post-Brexit not between North and South, but in the Irish Sea, between Great Britain and the island of Ireland. But would the unionist community tolerate what many would interpret as a loosening of Northern Ireland's place in the UK? Graham Gudgin used to be a political advisor to David Trimble when he was First Minister of Northern Ireland. He says such an arrangement could be sellable if packaged correctly.
Commodities which affect human health, I think, could be checked at the Irish Sea, because most of these are going to be on a lorry waiting at Stranraer in Scotland or wherever, for an hour or two to get on the ferry, and then they're going to be on the ferry for an hour or 2 hours. Plenty of time to check them to make sure that they have all the paperwork to say this is safe. My own contacts with DUP MPs are that they would think about this. As long as there are no constitutional implications, it's okay.
Now, obviously, we'd love to have interviewed a minister or talked to an official off the record about exactly how this border and its new technology was going to function. But unfortunately, and you probably know what I'm going to say next, no one was available to talk to us.
Perhaps the reason ministers are not keen to address detailed technical questions is, according to press reports earlier this month, government officials say the Max Fac solution would not be ready until at least 2023.
We're certainly not surprised by that. You also have to remember that we're not even into the substantive negotiating stage yet on the detail of the future trade arrangements with the EU. And to some extent, you need to know what the shape of that's going to be before you know exactly what kind of customs arrangements and therefore technology you have to have.
Even though much of the front-end technology is mature and available, stitching it all together in a working system that businesses are prepared for is a huge task. David Davis once criticised Labour ministers for relying on fantastical, unproven technology to get them out of difficult political situations. Writing in The Guardian in 2008 about ID cards, he said, "Faced with intractable problems, with political pressure for a solution, the government reaches for a headline-grabbing high-tech solution. Rather than spend the resources, time and thought necessary to get a real answer, they naively grasp solutions that to the technologically illiterate ministers look like magic. And most ministers are very illiterate about any serious technology." David Davis is now, of course, the biggest cabinet supporter of the technological border solution.
The best technology in the world would not be enough absent a negotiated agreement with the EU, under which the EU also decides to go for some of these max trade facilitation measures and the technological solutions that are needed to make trade close to frictionless.
Borders all over the world are getting more high-tech, but, and this is the key point, technology can only eliminate physical infrastructure where there is agreement and trust between the countries on either side.